Blog Talk Radio.
Blueshirt Underground, motherfucker! Can't BS a Ranger fan. Can't BS a Ranger fan.
This is an unlawful gathering. This is an unlawful gathering. The truth is out there. The truth is out there.
If Sam Rosen was here right now, Eddie, do you know what he would say? They're on
he would
eat at the Garden. What an intro. Beautiful.
Uh-huh.
Love
Thank you. I was a little worried if it'd be well received by yourself.
I don't. They're asking in the chat room who the music is. Frosty says, is it Ministry? Costa asks, is it Anthrax? I have no idea.
It's Slayer.
Hall & Oates.
And,
that is a
Hall &
Carly Simon song. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Blueshirt Underground Radio. It is Wednesday, July the 6th. We hope you had a great holiday weekend. Eddie, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I know you're battling some physical maladies, but you're hanging in there with the cold and the whole thingamajig. And
on a cold and dust, and like I told my wife, I've been pulling crusty dusties out of my nose all day. It's just all right.
It's a nasty mess.
I had to go there. Blueshirt Underground, motherfuckers. Great opening. I love it. I love it. It was beautiful. Well done.
You.
Thank you guys all for being here. We'll have James Patrick in just a minute or two, and we'll be good to go. Hope you guys are having a great week, and we'll talk to James. We're going to take phone calls for James. So if you guys want to call in for James, and you're in the chat room, let me know that you're calling for James and that you have a question for him. Phone number 646-478-4692, because a lot of times we'll have a guest. I'll put you guys on with the guest, and you go, I really just wanted to talk to you guys. Or I leave you guys on hold, and then after the guest, I put you on the air, and you go, oh, I really had a question for John Rattel when he was on the line, even though we never had John Rattel. So let me know.
Right, so
let me know in the chat if you guys want to talk to James.
I'll go get James.
Okay.
And you mute me, and I'll signal you when we're ready.
All right. I will mute you now. All right. So Eddie is muted, and he will go get James Patrick. Let me know when he's back. And like I said, if you guys want to call it, John Sim next week, Frosty. By the way, since I didn't want to say anything because I was hoping he would answer me, but he has not as of yet, Frosty. I reached out to Bob Froese about 2 weeks ago, sent him an email to ask him if he'd want to come on to the show. You know, told him the whole bit where we were about, and you know, I told him that even though he didn't spend the bulk of his career with the Rangers, that he was, and I said that you were held in high regard by Ranger fans, and I specifically said, including one that calls himself Froze99 in our chat room, and we have nicknamed him Frosty. And I sent him this very nice email, and that's what I got back. So Reverend Bob Froese, so far, is non-responsive at best, I would call that. So Mr. Froese, as I once called him when I met him, and he said, "No, please call me Bob." That's a true story. I was like 16 years old. He was still with the Flyers, actually, when I met him. So Mr. Froese, Bob, Reverend Bob, Pastor Bob, whatever you want to call him, so far he has not responded to my reaching out. But without further ado, I believe we have Eddie back, so let me try and work this new switchboard here. See, Eddie, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good.
James Patrick is also with me, and maybe he could speak to why Mr. Bob Froese is not answering us.
Good evening, James. Welcome back to the program. Jim and Eddie with you, Blueshirt Underground Radio. Yeah, I was just telling our audience how I reached out to Reverend Bob, Pastor Bob, Mr. Froese, Bob Froese, and so far he's been non-responsive. But that's okay. I understand he's busy. He answers to a higher calling these days than Blueshirt Underground Radio.
Yeah, he does. I didn't know when I came into the conversation here, I didn't know if you had just finished talking to him or if you were still trying to track him down. I feel worse than you guys because I've been in Buffalo for 11 years now. Bob lives, I think, 10 minutes away from I do, and I've never ran into him or spoken to him. But my wife has seen him a few times and ran into him in the late spring, and we actually talked about getting together in the fall. So I might finally see him. But I know he's a pastor or reverend in one of the churches in Clarence, New York, and I guess that keeps him busy doing that. So.
I guess so. And we may have to send a gift to James to present to Pastor Bob. Maybe the home edition of Blueshirt Underground Radio game that we like to give to as consolation prizes, and James could present that to Bob and say, look, these guys aren't that bad.
Now, well, I'd be happy to, because it might be an opportunity for me to finally see him again after all these years.
Now, from what I've heard about Bob Froese, he had a little bit of a temperament in practice. I forgot one ex-Ranger told me that he once threw his stick at him during practice. Do you remember Bob with that kind of demeanor, James?
Yeah, extremely intense. He wasn't that Christian-like on the ice. I don't think he used vulgar language anymore, but he still was very intense, and the face got red, and he had some anger in him when someone got too close to his space in the net. I think the strength of Bob as a goalie was his intensity, but he sometimes took it out on his teammates in practice. It's hard, back in those days, you didn't shoot high on a goalie in practice. It seems like it's commonplace now. And anyways, like I can remember, like my whole career, like maybe once or twice I accidentally let a high shot go, and and didn't feel too good about it. But you just that unwritten rule back then, and it would happen once in a while. And if it did, the guy like Bob was coming after you with his stick. So.
What was there, James? Was there someone else who stands out when you were playing? Somebody else that was that intense in practice, and maybe his temper was always ready to flare like that.
There was always intense guys who played played physical, whether it was a practice or a game. I even remember like Mark Osborne was a guy who played real physical. I'm not making light of it, but Mark was a born again Christian as well. But I just remember he was a guy. He finished checks and I know he had some injury problems with the Rangers, but I remember the time I spent with him, there was a few guys that ended up getting in fisticuffs with him in practice because he was playing it like a game. And even I know as a coach now, it's that fine line. Like you want your players to practice hard. You want them to, more intense practice. That's how they do get better. But sometimes with an 82-game schedule, you got to take a step back and be smart. You don't want to injure your own teammates. As far as intensity, I've never seen, probably the two hardest working goalies I played with were Mike Richter and Dominic Hasek. And Dominic Hasek was legendary. I know he was an eccentric, different guy, but he wanted to play he wanted to play 70 games a year. Was extremely intense. I'd never played with a goalie who got scored on less in practice. There'd be a practice where goalies are getting hundreds and hundreds of shots, and he would remember every goal that got scored on him. So that's that as far as the intensity. And Mike Richter was similar as far as his work ethic. He really worked hard, was in phenomenal shape. Before the Richter era, the goalies were always on the other shape side. But John Van Beeswick was in good shape too. But it was still part of that era where the goalies were kind of chunky and overweight, and they didn't have to do much skating, didn't do off-season workout programs. Mike Richter was in better shape than 99% of the guys on the team. They worked extremely hard.
I had a question, and it's kind of I guess it's not an odd question, but it's kind of out of left field, right field, center field, depending, if you're a baseball fan, what position you like. But, in the old days, and when I say the old days, I'm talking the mid-'80s, which aren't really that old, some of us, but there used to be a lot of, I want to know if this happened in the Ranger dressing room, where older players, players that weren't with the team, would they come into the dressing room occasionally, for instance, a Rod Gilbert or, Andy Bathgate? I don't know. Was that a common thing back then? Did you see a lot of that?
I never met Andy Bathgate. I knew Rod was around all the time. He would bring in teammates, Pete Stemkowski. I remember, meeting him, Vic Hadfield. Rod, I probably was the liaison. He was, I think he was doing community relations, but was just a real classy guy who would stop by the Players Lounge and say, always say a few words to different guys. And I remember Alf Nilsson coming around a lot. He was still living in New York, but hadn't been playing for a number of years. I think the teams got away from that, and I think they are trying to go back to it now. I know here in Buffalo, with our new ownership, he's really tried to reach out to the alumni. But I know whoever was in New York was always, Rod would be the guy bringing them just outside the dressing room, and you'd at least get a chance to say hi or shake their hands. And Brad Park, I remember meeting Brad. So again, for young players, to meet some of the guys you grew up watching.
Now, as a player and/or coach, how do you view that? Do you think that's a helpful thing to have those guys around, or maybe you don't want them mixing in and maybe giving a player the wrong advice?
Yeah, I don't think it. I really don't think I have ever seen it as a distraction. I know, maybe a coach would be fearful. You get ex-players around and they say, no, don't do it the way he's telling you, do it this way. But I do think from guys telling about some old stories, some war stories, from, camaraderie about with the team and some, battle scars stories, I think that's a positive. I think there's so few guys who come back and even try and be a negative distraction. It just doesn't. I don't see that happening, and I don't think. I do know. I heard this story this year about Jacques Lemaire and how many coaches he wanted around the team, and then a big. He said, "How do you know what they're saying to your players? How do you know you can trust them?" And that's different. That's coaches, and I don't look at ex-players